Pirates slept through storms that launched men 6 feet into the air, breaking bones of 23 sailors in one Atlantic tempest. They tied themselves into hammocks like cocoons, but many went to sleep and never saw sunrise again. How did they survive when waves taller than masts threatened to swallow entire ships? Forget fancy 5-star hotels, and pirates were masters at sleeping through storms that would make sailors today really sick. While waves crashed and ships creaked all around them, these tough sea dogs somehow found a way to get their sleep. How did they do it? Their sleep tricks were stranger than you could ever think up. When it came to sleeping at sea, wooden beds were pretty much useless. In rough waters, you would spend more time getting thrown around than actually sleeping. That's where hammocks changed everything for sailors. These simple hanging beds were borrowed from the Taino people of the Caribbean. These native people had figured out the perfect way to sleep comfortably hanging up, long before Europeans ever sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. What made hammocks so amazing wasn't just that they were comfortable. It was science. While the ship rocked back and forth through waves, hammocks moved along with the motion instead of fighting against it. This meant pirates didn't get tossed around like dice in a cup every time a wave hit the ship. History books tell us that switching to hammocks cut down injuries by almost 40% during storms. Fewer head bumps meant pirates got better rest. This probably saved many lives when quick thinking was needed during battles. Hanging these hammocks was like an art. They needed to be tied with just the right tightness. Too loose and you would swing wildly with every wave. Too tight and you might as well be sleeping on a wooden board. Most sailors got thick skin on their hands from tying down their sleeping spots every day. Pirates usually slept about 5 feet above the deck. This gave enough space to avoid the water that often splashed across the floors during storms. This distance also gave them another big advantage: fewer unwanted nighttime visitors. Rats were always on ships, spreading sickness and chewing through important supplies. But most rats couldn't climb the ropes to reach sleeping pirates. Back then, before modern cleaning methods, this alone made hammocks worth their weight in gold. Learning to sleep in a hammock wasn't easy for new sailors. Many spent their first weeks falling out over and over again. This made the older crew members laugh a lot. Ship records mention traditions where new sailors had to do extra work for every night they hit the floor. This practice certainly made them learn fast. The space under hammocks became valuable storage space. Sailors would hang small bags with their most special things right under them. This made sure nobody could steal their stuff without waking them up. The smart ones wrapped these treasures in oiled cloth to protect them from the constant wetness that got into everything at sea. On really rough nights, some pirates would wrap themselves into their hammocks like cocoons. They used the fabric as both bed and safety belt. This kept them from falling out in their sleep, but created another problem. If they needed to move quickly during an emergency, they would be struggling to get untangled while everyone else was already helping. Where you hung your hammock on the ship had its own politics. The closer to the middle of the ship, the less extreme the rocking was. Senior crew members claimed these best spots. New sailors got stuck near the front or back where the bouncing was most violent. One story tells about a clever quartermaster who would trade better hammock spots for extra rum drinks. Even though they were just pieces of canvas and rope, hammocks were among a pirate's most treasured things. They were often decorated with special knots or small decorations that showed whose was whose. When a pirate died at sea, sometimes their hammock became their burial cloth, wrapped around them before being put into the deep ocean. But even the perfect hammock could only do so much when Mother Nature decided to test a ship's limits. Midnight strikes. The ship rocks so hard your stomach thinks it's trying out for the circus. Outside, waves taller than the main pole threaten to swallow the whole ship. Welcome to sleeping through a storm at sea, where staying in bed becomes an extreme sport. During violent storms, even the most perfectly hung hammock couldn't promise you would stay put. Ship records from the early 1700s describe waves powerful enough to throw sleeping men 6 feet into the air, before gravity reminded them who was boss. One British Navy record noted that during a really bad Atlantic storm, 23 sailors broke bones from being launched from their sleeping spots. Not exactly the wake-up call anyone hopes for. The solution? Many pirates tied themselves into their hammocks using extra ropes. This technique, called lashing in, meant wrapping rope across your body and tying it to the hammock support lines. The trick was finding the right tightness. Too loose and you would still get tossed around. Too tight and you would wake up with arms so numb they might as well belong to someone else. A storm at sea doesn't care if you're tired, reads one captain's record from 1734, and it certainly didn't. When waves crashed over the deck, seawater found its way everywhere. Many sailors woke to find themselves soaking wet even though they were below deck. The constant dripping from the ceiling boards above created what sailors called sea showers. Unexpected cold drips that would land right on your face just as you were falling asleep. The sounds alone were enough to keep anyone awake. The creaking of wooden beams straining against the force of the ocean. The thunderous crash of waves against the hull. The whistling of wind through every tiny crack in the ship's construction. Below deck became a nightmare concert hall, where nature performed its most terrifying symphony. Those without hammocks came up with other ways to avoid becoming human cannonballs. Some slept wedged between barrels, creating barriers on both sides. Others tied themselves directly to fixed objects like support beams or stairways. The least lucky simply slept on the floor, pressing themselves against walls and holding on to anything bolted down. Among crews with a sense of humor, there was a betting game called launch wagers. Crew members would place bets on who would be thrown from their sleeping spot first during a storm. The stakes? Usually extra rum drinks or first pick of treasure from the next successful raid. Nothing lifted spirits during scary weather like the chance of earning an extra drink at a friend's expense. Keeping belongings safe during a storm required equal cleverness. Most valued possessions were stored in sea chests that were either bolted to the floor or wedged so tightly between support beams that not even the angriest ocean could move them. Small items were often kept in pouches worn around the neck, even during sleep. After all, what good was surviving the storm if all your worldly treasures ended up at the bottom of the sea? Interestingly, some sailors claimed to sleep better during storms than on calm nights. The explanation? When waves threatened to sink the ship at any moment, small worries and fears faded away. Plus, the violent rocking motion, once you got used to it, could be surprisingly hypnotic, like being in a giant, terrifying cradle. Most fascinating were the beliefs surrounding sleeping during storms. Some believed sleeping with your head pointing toward the front of the ship would bring good luck and calm waters by morning. Others insisted that crossing your arms over your chest while sleeping would anger the sea gods who might mistake you for being already dead and ready for burial. These beliefs varied widely from ship to ship, creating a complex web of sleeping rituals that no sensible sailor would dare ignore. As dawn broke after a stormy night, exhausted pirates would come up from below deck, counting themselves lucky to have survived yet another night of being tossed about like dice in a cup. But for some, the experience was totally different. The watchmen were the thin line between survival and disaster, given the job of scanning the horizon for threats while everyone else rested. Why can't we just sleep all night? This question, likely asked by every new pirate, had a simple answer. Because the ocean never sleeps. About 30% of shipwrecks happen during nighttime hours, with more than half blamed on poor lookouts. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Fall asleep at the wrong moment and the entire crew might never wake up again. Pirates used the 4-hour watch system. The night was divided into several 4-hour shifts, with different crew members assigned to each. This made sure no single person had to stay awake the entire night while keeping constant watch. Ship records show this method dated back to ancient sailing traditions, proven to work across centuries of seafaring. The midnight to 4 in the morning shift earned the dreaded nickname the Dead Watch. Not because of ghosts, but because it was when human alertness naturally hit its lowest point. During this shift, watchmen would pinch themselves, splash seawater on their faces, or pace endlessly to fight off sleep. Some resorted to humming sea songs under their breath, creating rhythm patterns to keep their minds busy. Long before coffee became common on ships, watchmen chewed tobacco or sucked on pieces of hard bread soaked in rum to stay alert. These methods weren't very good by today's standards, but they gave enough boost to keep eyelids from completely shutting. Some pirate ships captured in the Caribbean had stores of cocoa leaves which sailors chewed for their energy effects, though these were rare treats. The most desperate anti-sleep technique involved pain. Watchmen would sometimes tie pieces of rope around their fingers designed to tighten if their arms dropped in sleepiness. The sudden pain served as an immediate wake-up call. Others stood barefoot on purposely uncomfortable surfaces, small shells or pebbles placed on deck, knowing that sitting would cause discomfort. Falling asleep on watch wasn't just frowned upon, it could get you killed as punishment. Ship rules, the laws governing pirate ships, often listed punishment for sleeping watchmen among their most severe penalties. One recovered pirate code specified that a watchman caught sleeping would be flogged around the fleet, tied to a small boat and pulled past every ship in the harbor, receiving lashes from each crew. Weather conditions made staying awake extra challenging. Fog created a boring gray world where minutes felt like hours. Rain, combined with the rhythmic rocking, produced a lullaby nearly impossible to resist. Cold drained energy and made eyelids heavy. Yet through all these conditions, watchmen had to stay perfectly aware. The equipment used was simple but essential. Lanterns were kept dim to preserve night vision. Early versions of spyglasses helped scan distant horizons. Bell systems allowed watchmen to sound alarms instantly if threats appeared. Most importantly, watchmen had to master the art of seeing in darkness using side vision rather than looking directly at objects. This allowed the light-sensitive edges of the eye to detect movement more effectively. A common trick was the one-eye method. By keeping one eye closed when looking at lanterns, they preserved night vision in that eye. This let them quickly scan the darkness again without waiting for their pupils to readjust. This technique, still taught in modern marine training, saved countless ships from surprise attacks. When the sun came up and their watch ended, these tired sailors would drag themselves below deck, ready to fall asleep at last. The lower deck of a pirate ship was where most of the crew slept, and it was about as far from a 5-star hotel as you could get. This dark, damp space packed dozens of sweaty, unwashed men into an area smaller than a modern classroom. Records from the early 1700s show that on average, each sailor had about 6 square feet of space, barely enough to lie down in. The smell hit you first, a mix of mold, salt water, sweat, and vomit that hung in the air like an invisible fog. With little fresh air making its way below deck, this smell became so normal that sailors often couldn't detect it after a few weeks at sea. Visitors who boarded captured ships often wrote about the wall of stench that greeted them when they went below. One Navy officer described it as the smell of death, without the courtesy of being dead. Bugs loved this environment. Lice, fleas, and bed bugs were such common shipmates that sailors stopped bothering to kill them after a while. Many pirates shaved their heads completely or wore tight cloths wrapped around their scalps to cut down on head lice. It wasn't uncommon for a pirate to wake up with dozens of new bug bites each morning. Rats thrived on pirate ships. These unwanted crew members would scurry across sleeping faces, chew through ropes and food stores, and spread disease. A medium-sized pirate ship might house hundreds of rats. Unlike the bugs, rats were actively hunted, not just as pest control, but also as a source of fresh meat when supplies ran low. Ship cats were valued crew members, often given special treatment for their vital work, keeping the rat population down. The noise never stopped. Even at night, a pirate ship was a symphony of awful sounds. Snoring echoed throughout the cramped space, the wooden hull creaked and groaned with every wave. Men talked, argued, coughed, and passed gas without shame. The sick moaned in pain. Gambling games continued at all hours. Studies of old sailing ships suggest the noise level in sleeping areas was about as loud as standing next to a busy modern highway. Privacy simply didn't exist. Your hammock might be just inches from your neighbors. Every bodily function happened with an audience. Any conversation could be heard by a dozen other men. This lack of privacy led to a strange mix of complete openness about some things and carefully guarded secrets about others. Pirates often kept small pouches with private items tied around their necks while they slept. Perhaps the only personal space they truly had. The dampness was impossible to escape. Water always found its way into the lower decks, either from waves washing over the ship or from leaks in the hull. Clothes never fully dried, hammocks and bedding grew mold. In cold weather, this dampness chilled sailors to the bone. One study of medical records from pirate ships showed that about 20% of illness was related to constant exposure to damp conditions. Light was a rare luxury below deck. A few oil lamps might be lit during evening hours, but they were usually put out to prevent fires while the crew slept. Most pirates got used to moving around in near total darkness, feeling their way to their sleeping spots. Despite these awful conditions, exhausted pirates could sleep through almost anything. Records mention men continuing to snore peacefully, even during battles, only waking when physically shaken. The body adapts to what it must. New crew members might spend weeks unable to rest properly. But eventually, even the worst conditions became normal enough to sleep through. Finding the least awful spot to hang your hammock became an art form. The best locations were near air vents or hatches, away from the ship's toilet area, and far from food storage that might attract rats. These prime sleeping spots were often fought over or used as gambling stakes. After weeks at sea in these conditions, pirates developed creative ways to make their sleep slightly less miserable. Faced with terrible sleeping conditions, pirates didn't just suffer, they adapted. Over time, they developed clever tricks that helped them catch some rest despite the challenges. These sleep hacks were passed down from veteran sailors to newcomers as essential survival skills. Step 1. Pick the right spot. The most skilled pirates could read a ship like a map, identifying the driest areas and spots with the best airflow. The center of the ship offered the most stable ride with less violent rocking during storms. Areas near the front got the freshest air but suffered the most movement. Smart pirates avoided sleeping near the galley, where food smells attracted rats, or near the ship's toilet area, called the head for obvious reasons. According to ship records, fights over prime sleeping locations were common, especially during the first few days of a voyage. Clothing choices made a huge difference. While it might seem strange to sleep fully dressed, pirates rarely undressed for bed. Keeping clothes on provided extra warmth in the damp environment and meant they were ready for action if attacked in the night. However, they did develop a system. Many would rotate between two sets of clothes, wearing one while the other dried out as much as possible. Some pirates slept with a layer of grease on exposed skin to repel insects, a technique borrowed from native Caribbean tribes. The pillow situation required creativity. Official Navy ships sometimes provided small pillows, but pirates had to improvise. The most common solution was using their own hat, stuffed with whatever soft material was available. Ship records mention sailors collecting feathers, cloth scraps, and even dried seaweed to create makeshift pillow stuffing. A rolled-up jacket could serve the same purpose. One account mentions a pirate who kept a small sack of coffee beans as a pillow, claiming the smell helped cover the stench of the ship. Noise management was crucial. Many pirates carried beeswax or cloth to stuff in their ears. Others learned to time their sleep around the ship's activities, catching naps during the quietest periods. Some crews established quiet hours, periods when gambling and loud talk were forbidden so that off-duty sailors could rest. Breaking these quiet hours could result in punishment, usually extra work shifts. For dealing with pests, pirates developed a range of solutions. Hanging small bags of strong-smelling herbs near sleeping areas helped repel some insects. Rats dislike certain smells, particularly mint and tobacco, so these might be scattered around sleeping areas. Some pirates slept with their food rations tied to their bodies to prevent theft by rats or fellow crew members. Rat guards, metal discs placed on the ropes holding hammocks, prevented rats from climbing down into sleeping areas. Temperature control was another challenge. In cold weather, pirates would sleep huddled together for warmth, setting aside usual personal space concerns. During hot tropical nights, sailors soaked strips of cloth in seawater and hung them near their hammocks. As air passed over these wet cloths, it created a primitive cooling system. Ship records from Caribbean voyages note that sailors would often sleep on deck during extremely hot nights, preferring the risk of sudden rain to the stifling heat below. Insomnia remedies varied widely among pirates. Rum was the most common sleep aid, though too much made for poor quality rest. Chewing on willow bark, a natural source of compounds similar to aspirin, helped those with pain-induced sleeplessness. Many pirates carried sleep tokens, small objects like polished stones or carved bits of wood that they would hold while falling asleep. These served as psychological comfort items in an uncertain world. Finding darkness for sleep required creativity. Ships had limited artificial light, but moonlight through hatches could be bright enough to disturb sleep. Many pirates fashioned simple eye covers from scraps of dark cloth. These primitive sleep masks blocked out light and provided a psychological sense of privacy in the crowded conditions. Despite all these clever adaptations, not every night brought restful sleep. Sleep was dangerous business on a pirate ship. For all their clever hacks and adaptations, many pirates went to sleep one night and never saw another sunrise. Death came in many forms, and it often struck when sailors were most vulnerable, deep in slumber. Getting washed overboard during sleep ranked among the most common fatal accidents at sea. When fierce storms struck suddenly, waves could crash over the deck with enough force to tear sailors from their hammocks or sweep away those who had chosen to sleep on deck to escape the heat below. Ship records from the golden age of piracy are filled with grim entries like 2 men lost to the sea during night storm. Studies suggest that as many as 1 in 20 sailor deaths came from being swept overboard while sleeping. Nighttime attacks claimed many sleeping pirates. Enemy ships would approach under cover of darkness, hoping to catch their targets unprepared. A sleeping crew might wake to find grappling hooks already securing an enemy vessel to their ship and armed boarders streaming onto their deck. Historical facts show that nearly 60% of captures happened during pre-dawn hours, specifically to catch pirates sleeping. Disease spread like wildfire through ships. In the cramped, unsanitary conditions below deck, illness could pass from one sailor to everyone else within days. Many pirates went to sleep feeling slightly unwell and never woke up, claimed by fever during the night. Yellow fever, malaria, and smallpox were common killers. Medical records from captured pirate ships show that disease killed 5 times more pirates than combat. The ship itself could become a death trap. Fires broke out easily among the wooden structures, especially near the galley or from knocked-over lanterns. With limited firefighting capabilities, a small fire could quickly become unstoppable. Pirates sleeping below deck might be trapped if fire blocked their exits, or worse, might die from smoke inhalation before they even woke up. Pirate-on-pirate violence claimed many lives during sleep. Despite codes of conduct that punished murder, disputes over treasure shares or personal grudges sometimes led to deadly nighttime attacks on sleeping crew members. Ship articles from several pirate crews specifically mentioned harsh punishments for attacking sleeping crew members, suggesting this was a common enough problem to need addressing. Being left behind happened more often than pirates like to admit. If a ship needed to leave port quickly, any crew members still sleeping off a night of drinking ashore might be abandoned. With no money and now branded as pirates in a hostile port, these unfortunate souls often faced imprisonment or execution. The silent killer that many claim was carbon monoxide poisoning. In cold weather, pirates might bring small braziers or coal pots below deck for warmth. Without proper ventilation, these heat sources consumed oxygen and released deadly gas. Entire sections of the crew could die in their sleep, never knowing what hit them. Rat bites led to deadly infections. While sleeping, pirates were easy targets for bold ship rats seeking food or salt from sweat. These bites often became infected in unsanitary conditions. A seemingly minor nip could develop into a fatal case of blood poisoning within days. But for those who survived the perils of sleeping at sea, there was always another day of adventure ahead. After all, a pirate's life was all about beating the odds.